Right, we're live on YouTube.
Can you put your microphone on mute, please, Councillor Saxon? Thank you. Okay, I make that 7 o'clock. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Skegness Town Council meeting, Wednesday the 7th of April 2021 at 7 p.m. Good evening if you're all joining us out there via Zoom. Agenda item number 1, the minutes of the last meeting. Attached, pages 61, 62, 63, 64 and 65. Any questions? Councillor Burnham?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move on, please.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favour, please show. We got that, Town Clerk? Oh, everybody just keeps disappearing off my screen.
Certainly there was a majority.
Okay, thank you. This update doesn't help. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2, to note apologies received by the Town Clerk prior to the meeting. Town Clerk, please.
Mayor, we have apologies from councillors Anderson and Cunnington, and Councillor Blackburn said that she will try to make the meeting, but maybe late.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only the payments one, if you give the Town Clerk and pop me into the waiting room, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the Town Clerk put me in the waiting room for agenda item 16, as I'm a governor at the school? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Town Clerk.
Councillor Brooks doesn't have to go into the waiting room. He just can't vote because it will be a category B. So he can stay in the meeting, but just can't vote on the meeting.
Okay, thank you. You okay with that, Councillor Brooks?
As long as I don't have to say anything, I'll be fine.
I won't let you. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, the public participation. There is none. Agenda item number 5, the Town Mayor's announcements or correspondence. We've just had some news come in that a former councillor, Janet Shuttleworth, had sadly passed away. So I'd like to send our condolences from the council to her family and friends. So again, another sad news. But other than that, everything is available on the website should you wish to catch up with any announcements made by the Town Clerk and the office team.
Mayor, can I just also put into the announcements that we've had to move the town meeting to the 26th of May. This is because of the situation with Herder and the potential difficulty in holding that meeting and ensuring that everyone attending complies with the rules within it. So we've moved it to the 26th of May, which is after the election. It does of course present us with a difficulty because we have to hold this meeting before the end of May, Of course, after the 6th of May, holding such meetings via Zoom is not permitted by legislation, but equally we can't hold it a public meeting because of the COVID restriction. So I see this as being the best option that is open to the council in terms of discharging its duties to hold a meeting whilst complying with those parts of the legislation which are likely to have the biggest impact on the council should we fall foul of them.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to vote on that in town, Clerk?
Well, normally it is yourself that calls the meeting, so you can do that unilaterally of council. There is, I mean, effectively, there isn't really much choice because we are either going to be in breach of PERDA rules, or we're going to be in breach of COVID rules, or we're going to be in breach of the regulations about holding the town meeting in the way that's set out in the legislation. So there isn't a no risk outcome for the council, but that looks to be the best option in that we will be discharging our duty to hold such a meeting. It just won't be entirely in compliance with the legislation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the town meeting, so it's a meeting of the town, not a meeting of the council. And PERDA comes along every 2 years, and I've never known us have to move a town meeting just to comply with PERDA. Elections have always been at the same time, and our town meeting roughly has also been at the same time. So I can't quite understand, and I'm hoping to be educated by the clerk, but I can't quite understand how on this occasion we can't hold it because of PERDA, when in every other previous 2 years we have done.
It's because we would be using the council's resources to broadcast it, and that is what would potentially, if you get a member of the public, for example, deciding to make political statements or other political comments, that would be using the council's resources for that purpose, which would be a breach of PERDA. We've looked at what other councils are doing, and many are actually deciding to defer them during the election period. Normally, we would just simply hold the meeting after the meeting in normal times, and there wouldn't be any issue because it would just be a face-to-face meeting later in May.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Kirk?
So thank you. Yeah, that was a perfect explanation. I hadn't quite got my head around the fact that we were broadcasting using our technology, and therefore we would be promoting it. So thank you very much for that explanation. I'm sure many people were thinking the same.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure. And we did have some advice, and we've been exchanging emails, and the town clerk's been looking deeply into it. So the next meeting will move, the annual meeting will move to the 26th of May, 2021. Any further on that, town clerk, or is that all we need to discuss on that?
The annual council meeting will remain as it is because of council business is allowed to continue. The annual council meeting will continue, which is I think it's the day before the election. So as for this meeting, obviously councillors, members have to be just a little bit careful about how they, what they say within that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can we put Councillor Dennis for the next agenda item in the waiting room, please? Agenda item number 6, schedule of payments for approval. List of the payments and bank reconciliations are attached. Councillor Claxton.
I just a question for the clerk. What's all the blacked out VPs and FPIs? I know what they're made for, but I don't understand why we can't see who they're made to. That's on the 26th of February. That's a substantial amount of money gone out of the account. got a sum of 20,000. Roughly off the top of my head, £20,000, and we can't see who it's to.
Town clerk, please.
The payments are actually shown on the payment schedule, and that does show the recipients. What the bank account is doing is that's removing the bank account numbers and personal details of the they may be payees or they may be people who have paid the council. So it's removing their details so that they're not visible from a banking perspective. But all of the payments that have gone through are on the payment schedule, which is attached. Now, the date difference is obviously there may be a difference between the day that we've made a payment and the date it's actually gone out of the bank account, but it should be within a day or so.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see an amount of that's matching that figure. Okay. No, is that answered my? Yeah, that answered my question. Then fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Town Clerk. Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, a couple of questions for the clerk, please. Lauk subscription. It's £2,600 for. Am I right in thinking that's for the year?
That's correct. The Lauk figures are for the year. It's broken down into, we pay a subscription to Lauk, a subscription to Lauk for Nauk, and we also pay a training an amount as well. So that's a much smaller amount.
Yeah, the reason I was just looking at it is obviously I just wondered what we got for £50 and 75 pence per week. What do we actually get for that? It just seems a lot for a subscription, and what do we get in return for £50 and 75 pence a week?
Well, Lauk are the Lincolnshire Association of Local Councils. They are the body that represents parish and town councils in Lincolnshire, and they in turn come under the umbrella of the National Association of Local Councils. The sorts of things that we get from them are advice and guidance on certain issues that perhaps we wouldn't commonly have the knowledge or experience of, and they would often go off and commission that. So it might be on a legal matter. We would ask the question, they would go and get a third party to provide that information, and then they would give us the answers. They sometimes, certainly for smaller parishes, they would give a lot of support and guidance to parish clerks who often work for a small number of hours alone. Obviously, we're in a slightly more fortunate position than that, but the sorts of questions that we would likely ask are probably going to be legal ones, which would have larger fees attached to them.
Yeah, thank you. And my second question is the 2021 budget for the software was 5,700. This year it's at 6,500. And over the year, I have noticed, I mean, I've questioned it before, obviously, the software support that we've had. Did that come within the estimated budget, or are we on track for the 21-22 budget? It just obviously, I mean, I've asked the questions before, and yet again, I keep seeing software on software, and I know we only had a 6,500 budget for it.
We've got different parts of the software. There's specific application software that support things like cemetery, finance, and allotments and payroll. We've then got our general IT support, which supports our use of the Microsoft applications, our PCs, our server, our network, our wireless network, etc. And then we have our web side of things, so the web support that we pay for as well. So all of those things come together, and bills come in at different times of years. I haven't as yet got the end of year figure. We're still working on the end of year accounts at the moment, and not all of the things have been loaded into the accounts. That will be coming to management in a few weeks' time, towards the end of April, which will be the provisional end of year accounts, subject to internal audit, etc.
Are those available to all councillors, those lists of payments throughout the year, specifically for this software?
We publish all of our payments on the website. So every payment that's come through here goes on the website, and so you can track back and look at those. But I mean, we would summarise those into the accounts, which shows the detail, how much we've spent on each of the areas that we've got a budget sent against, and you then be able to see what our expenditure is against the budget. But we'll have that in the next. I'm expecting to get that out. Something will come to management, as I say, towards the end of April, and then it will be one of the items. The end of the year accounts will be on annual council in the beginning of May.
All answered your questions, Councillor Finlay. Thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got 3 questions for the clerk. The first one, the salary on the 28th was 22,691.35. Then on the 26th of the 3rd, obviously the following month, it went up by about £820 to 23,511. If there were salaries, are they not at a fixed rate, or could you explain that? Do you want me to just ask me other questions, really easy ones? The other question is, we've got a payment for PHS Group Waste Disposal. Could that not have been dealt with by Sid Dennis and Son Limited or not? And then we've also got a payment of £3 for the land registry fee. I was wondering what that's for. Thank you.
I was trying to see the waste one. Do you know what date it was on?
2nd of the 3rd, 2021, for 264.42.
11th.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Right. The PHS contract is hygienic waste from toilets. So that's where they come along and empty the toilet bins. It's not, that's a specialist service. The £3 land registry fee was a charge for looking up the ownership on a piece of land adjacent to King George V Walk, in response to a query about a footpath. And the third one, which is to do with the salary costs, there will be differences from month to month for things like overtime. We also had some annual leave which related to staff who are furloughed in there. So it's a bit, they were unable to take annual leave at the time that they required. So that's how that got put in. And those are the main adjustments. We've also got a member of, as I reported to council previously, have got a long-term sickness issue, and we've got a member of staff who's working an extra 18.5 hours a week currently as well. So those are the differences.
Thank you. Councillor Claxton, did you want to come back, or did you have your hand up still from last time?
No, I've just got one more query. On the 2nd of the 3rd, got Burdens Group for ransom lease, 765.32.
That's for the large mower, as agreed by council about a year ago, I think.
Thank you.
What?
To answer your question, Councillor Claxton.
No, I don't know. I don't know what you mean by what does it mean by ransom lease? Is that the name of the company or?
No, the ransom is the name of the actual mower, and we lease it. So
Okay.
that will be the charge for it.
No, is that one-off charge or is that?
No, well, it's a lease charge. We pay it on a regular basis.
I mean, no. I mean, I'm asking like how regular is that payment? Is that
Uh,
quarterly or monthly or?
just trying to find it on my list at the moment.
When it appears on your budget list in front of you.
What date was it?
2nd of the 3rd. 6 days ago. Do you want a payment reference?
No. Oh, Bush Burdens ransom lease. That's a monthly charge.
So we're paying 15,000. Sorry, we're paying 8,500 a year for a mower.
Yeah, it's a very, very expensive mower.
I'd want it to be singing and dancing for that, but okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comeback on the PHS group. Is that like once a year, or how often is that payment made, or the toilets and all that sort of stuff sorted? Thank you.
We have 5 bins which are emptied every week, and we pay monthly.
Okay, thank you. Right, there's no further questions. Are you all happy with the payments in front of you? The bank statements.
Just need a proposer and seconder to approve them.
Yeah, I'll propose them, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Danny Brooks. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tony Ty, seconded. All in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. Can we bring Councillor Dennis back in the room, please? Check out. Moving on to agenda item number 7, councillor questions to the Mayor, none received. Agenda item number 8, questions to comments from the Lincolnshire Police representative, none received.
Councillor Hay, Inspector Hay gave his apologies for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 9, reports from council representatives from outside bodies are attached. Saltfleet to Drogheda Point strategy update by Councillor Billy Brooks. Connected Coast agendas, meeting papers by Tony Ty, Councillor Tony Ty, and Children's Advisory Board minutes provided by Councillor Dan Kirk. You have all those reports in front of you. Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to step down from this advisory board as my wife has taken a more senior position within the organisation that technically we could be scrutinising. So under conflict of interest, declaration of interest, I'll need to step down from that.
Thank you. Any further questions?
As Councillor Dan Kirk is stepping down, you might want to appoint a new representative.
We do that tonight. We can, yes.
We can do that. It doesn't have to be on notice to appoint.
Okay. Anybody wanting to go on the Children's Advisory Board?
I will.
Who was that?
Councillor
Claxton. Okay, Councillor Claxton's put a name for Councillor Jimmy Brooks.
I would second that nomination.
Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded. Do we have any more? Anybody else interested? It's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Simon Claxton. All in favour, please show. Have we got that, Town Clerk? I don't know how everybody else sees it, but I just see everybody moving and it just flashes. You're on mute, Town Clerk, sorry.
We haven't yet got a majority. There was 7 out of 14. Yes, that gives a majority.
I do apologise to everybody, but since we've had this update of the Zoom, everybody just disappears across my screen. You don't stay in the same place. So I'm sorry. So you've got all the reports in front of you. Councillor Terry Ty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, everybody who tuned in to last night's meeting with Lydia, I think you got a very good understanding of what was going on with the town fund, and I thought it was excellent, an excellent presentation from Lydia. I think it sort of put everything to bed for us, and we know exactly where we are and what's happening. So you've got it all in front of you. If you've got any questions, I'll try to answer them. And if I can't, I know my good friend, Councillor Dennis, will be able to.
Any questions?
I think Mr. Mayor was given a thorough update last night. I couldn't see anybody having any questions tonight, unless they weren't there, obviously.
Yes, yeah, that was my thoughts, Councillor Brooks.
Okay. So we really need to note these.
If there's no questions, then they are for noting.
So proposal for noting. Councillor Caxton.
I propose that the notes are noted.
Okay. Do you want to second it?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 10, reports by district and county councillors, none received. Agenda item number 11, planning and planning policy committee minutes, meeting minutes attached to approve and adopt otherwise resolutions within the minutes of the planning and planning policy meeting that was held on Wednesday, the 10th of March, 2021. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, hand up. Sorry. Dankirk, Councillor Dankirk, please.
I'm happy to propose that we adopt the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Claxton.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favour, please show. Yep.
That is a majority.
Thank you. Agenda item number 12, the HR committee meeting minutes are attached to approve or adopt otherwise resolutions within the minutes of the HR committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 24th of March, 2021. Councillor Dennis. No. Anybody got any questions? Councillor, just have to see which one came first. Councillor Dankirk.
I'm happy to propose that we adopt the minutes as an accurate reflection of the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit of a misunderstanding here. HO8, setting the objectives for the town clerk, which is what the HR committee should be doing, and it's proposed that the town clerk document some proposals and share these with view to establishing smart targets. Can somebody or the chairman just explain to me how that mechanism will work? We should be setting targets for town clerk as part of his performance appraisal. Have we set those targets and he's just converting them into smart targets, or is he setting his own targets and then we're measuring them against the targets that he's set? Just quite understand the mechanics.
Thank you. Councillor Dankirk.
Essentially, in summary, the targets in which the committee were to judge the clerk's performance were in relation to content that was, because there was absence of a appraisal last time, it's resulted in those outcomes not being relevant because they've already been achieved. So what has been agreed is that myself and the clerk, when convenient, will look at the council's vision. It was the committee's understanding that one of the key objectives for the subsequent targets is something that's in relation to the environment, and that being the fact that that's on the town council's business plan as an objective. So the point of that item was to allow the clerk to explore some things that and the committee to explore targets that are indeed appropriate, and in fact, in light of us not being able to act on the previous set, that's kind of, we've got to start from scratch pretty much.
Thank you. And do you want to come back on that, Councillor Steve Clerk?
Yeah, thank you. If I may. So I'm still not quite understanding this, and I do apologise, but who's setting these targets then?
The committee is to set the targets, but the committee need to ascertain what those could be, and that's where it was left.
Councillor Steve Clerk?
Okay, it seems a little bit strange to me, but if that's what the committee decided it wants to do, it seems to me the clerk is coming back with some proposals. He's meeting with the chairman to discuss those proposals, then meeting with the committee to discuss those proposals, then finalise recommendations of the councils based on the proposal that the clerk set for his own appraisal. It seems to me that the council should be meeting in a private session, setting what we think our target should be, then HR communicating out to the town clerk, and not the other way around. I must be really missing something obvious here, because it really does look like cart before horse.
Yeah, can I help here?
Please do. I'm probably
with any appraisal process, targets are agreed between the parties. That is, so in this case, it will be the council's representatives on the HR committee and myself, because clearly impossible targets you can't impose. So there is some input from myself to suggest what might be possible within the resources that we have available. And then that is for the committee then to decide whether, between us effectively. And that's the same way as that it would work with all staff, that there is a discussion that goes on about what is possible, the resources that are available, any skills or training that may be required to deliver on those. And so that's the discussion that that I will be having with the chairman of the committee. Once we've had that discussion, then it's for the chairman of the committee to agree with the committee what those targets could be, and then those will be brought back to council.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Clerk?
I think the clerk's just confirmed what I said. He's making some proposals, bringing them for the chairman to discuss. That's not two-way traffic, because the answer will be based on the proposals the clerk brings forward. Now, if those proposals can come forward and the committee can say, no, that's not acceptable, no, that's not acceptable, no, yes, we agree with that, I have no issues with it. But the way that is worded, it looks like the clerk is bringing forward his proposals, agreeing with the chairman what proposals are going forward, and HR committee are going to agree with them. That, to me, is not how an appraisal is conducted, having conducted hundreds in my professional career.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, I'll try and simplify it from where I'm at. I'm sure I'll be corrected by Councillor Dan Kirk or the town clerk if I'm wrong. New to HR, basically we went in, all the targets that were set originally for the town clerk were met. But what during the meeting, we discussed obviously additional targets for the good of the council, obviously to go through council. There was 2 items suggested, which I think Dan has just said that he'll be going through with the town clerk to discuss at what level target. I suppose we've got to meet with them. And plus last year during the pandemic, when we wasn't able to really actively do much with the, I'm not sure, Steve, you might be able to, Town Clerk, you might be able to correct me on this, but I thought we had 3 or 4 new groups or committees formed, which is additional workload for the Town Clerk. So there'll be more information and guidance required on that. So basically, there was more groups formed, and there was a couple of targets that we need to set, that we wanted to set for the Town Clerk to help us progress within previous meeting discussions. Does that make sense?
Councillor Kirk?
Sorry, no, I won't labour the point any further. I just these are the minutes of what that committee agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Tony Ty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Steve Kirk. Actually, he has made a very good point here that I do believe that our chairman of HR needs to call a mini meeting of just the committee, and then put the proposals down that we think that we're going to work with, then take them to the Town Clerk and see where we are. That's the correct way of doing it, not as Councillor Kirk has said, not allow Steve Larner to make all the rules to where he wants to be in 12 months. Thank you.
Mayor, I don't think it's very helpful to be having my appraisal broadcast across the whole of Skegness at this moment. And this really, if it's going to continue, should be a confidential item. What I will say is obviously based on the questions and the areas that were raised by the committee, I've gone away to look at those areas so that the chairman of the committee and I can have a discussion about them to bring further information in, because that wasn't available to the committee members during the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dan Kirk? No. Okay, you've got all the information in front of you. Councillor Tony Ty, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Miller, I'd left it up.
Okay, any further questions? The HR meeting minutes attached. Have we got anybody who wants to approve?
Mr. Mayor, I did propose that we adopt that the minutes were an accurate reflection of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dan Kirk. Do I have a seconder? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Claxton?
Yeah, I'll second those minutes. They are just minutes. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a proposal and a seconder. All in favour, please show.
Can I raise a point of order, Mr. Mayor?
You can, Councillor Kirk. Sorry, where you've gone. Oh.
Wherever I've moved to on your screen, we have a seconder who's seconding the minutes as being accurate, who wasn't at the meeting. It really needs to be a committee member, either Councillors Berman, Finlay, Sutton, or Ty.
I'll second them, Mr. Mayor.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So, been proposed and seconded. Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show.
That is now a majority.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 13. Urgent Care Treatment Care Centre, Skegness. The letter is attached. Town Clerk, please.
I haven't really, the information has been attached. I haven't really got anything to add to it.
Okay, thank you. You've got the letter attached. Anybody got any questions? Wanting to note this letter? Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to propose that we note the letter.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Kirk. All in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 14, VE Day event. The report is attached. Consider the most appropriate date for the proposed event to mark the VE Day in the light of the government roadmap and the lifting of the COVID restrictions.
So at a previous council, it was suggested that the event was moved to Armed Forces Day on the 26th of June. But of course, we won't know until a fortnight before the 21st of June what the government guidelines and any further restrictions will be, which simply won't leave enough time to organise the event in a safe and proper manner, should those guidelines be in any way restrictive. So council may wish to have another look at this to see when it wants to organise this. I mean, there's been various suggestions. One is it could be VJ Day in August. Not sure how that fits in with other activities such as, Carnival Week, or because many of those haven't yet been planned, or later in September, or at another date.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, right. I've had quite a few inquiries of ups and downs of people wanting to book elsewhere for different things throughout the rest of the year. Due to obviously, if we were to rejuvenate the idea this time this year, the planning of it and the knock-on effect of what people have already got booked in, due to the fact that the restrictions being lifted when they are, I don't think it would be the event we're looking for. So I think if we move it to next year, we're going to be 3 years away from our 80th, and this is actually the 75th VE Day celebration. I personally, if we move it another year, we're going to be 3 years away. I think we should maybe, as horrible as it sounds, maybe just run with normal events and not worry too much about this VE Day, due to the fact of the amount of planning it's going to be that we're still unsure about. And I don't know what council's feeling is, whether we just hold off till the 80th anniversary in 3 years' time, or whether we just keep jiggling it around to suit in the hope that we can regain the interest that we did originally. It's a really tricky one for me. I mean, yeah, we could do, yes, we can't do, we can move it. We're in season, out of season. There's too many ups and downs. It really needs to be on, when it originally was scheduled for. But unfortunately, it's I don't know, there's just so much planning involved with it. I think it could go terribly wrong for us in many ways. Just my opinion. I just think it's maybe should be moved to the 80th and concentrate on that. But people might have other views.
Point taken, Councillor Finlay, and I think we have to be mindful of what we're going through now in Parliament about the vaccine passport. Really, we don't know where we are going to be with that, and whether they're going to be for events. So we need to. We're probably a little bit too soon to be judging when we should have it. Councillor Steve Kerr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree entirely with Councillor Finlay and the problems with having it any time this year. There's too much in the air. We don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to get contaminated again from Europe as they go into their third wave, etc., etc.? So I would like to make the proposal, because I don't want to lose it, because I know all the hard work that went into it. But I would like to propose that it actually moves a full year to Armed Forces Day next year. And if it's a success, I believe it will be, that'll be a huge building block for the 80th anniversary VE Day. We'll know what really works and what doesn't work so well. So my proposal would be we move it a full year so that it's June of 2022 that we run it on, because a lot of hard work was done by that committee. A lot of things will move quite easily. We may not get the same acts, We know what sort of action we're looking for, and I just think it would be a really nice thing to have in the middle of June.
Thank you. Councillor Saxon. Councillor Saxon. We can't hear you. Can you turn your video off? See if it can help.
Can you now? Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, just second that proposal. It's shown that it will be done properly, and it'll be a bit harsh, and everything will be mixed up, and it won't be right. And they don't and so it needs to be done properly. So as I say, I'll second that proposal.
Thank you. So it's been proposed by Councillor Steve Kirk that we move it 1 full year to the Armed Forces Day, and been seconded by Councillor Saxon. Is there any other proposal? Can you turn your microphone off, please, yes, Councillor Saxon, and your video back on? Okay, it's been proposed and seconded that we move it 1 full year. All in favour, please show.
That's a majority.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 15, fees and charges for the hall hire. We're attached to approve an update in fees and charges that correct inconsistencies in the charges for hall hire.
This is in response to, we were looking through in relation to some potential bookings that we've got coming in, and we realised there was some inconsistencies in the figures, namely in an area where hiring the small and medium hall separately was actually cheaper than doing it to get to as a combined. And there was also some hourly rates that were, it was cheaper to hire something by hourly, the halls hourly, than it was to hire it for a whole session. So those have been changed. So it was the top line of private party, wedding, private function on the 4-day 8-hour sessions in Monday to Thursday and Friday 8 AM to 6 PM. And it was also the half-day sessions for the small, medium hall for the private party and for the national charity, and on the 4-hour session on a Saturday and Sunday. And we made some changes to the small and medium or on the full 8-hour session on a Saturday and Sunday, so that it actually now makes sense, so that anybody looking at booking would see that they would get a discount if they go for a longer period of time.
Thank you. Councillor Claxton.
Sorry, I've got a question for the clerk. Where it says deposits, regular users, how do you work out a regular user for the deposit? They're not paying nothing. I mean, the town's invested a hell of a lot of money into this this hall and building, and you're not charging deposits on anything for regular users. Regular users or not, you still need to cover yourself for deposits.
The reason behind that is because if they're booking, say, every week for a whole term, then having a situation where they pay us the deposit and then we hand it back, and then they pay it to us again and then we hand it back, it doesn't work. Plus also, if they're a regular user, we get to a point where we're more trusting of what they're doing, as opposed to somebody who we don't know at all, who just wants to hire it for, say, their own private party or function, who we don't, and we haven't got, any previous record of them treating the place decently.
Just exercise my right to reply there, sorry. As I said, regular or not, if something gets damaged, someone has to pay for
it. Agreed, and that is part of the terms and conditions. But obviously, if it's a well-known Skegness group that are using it on a regular basis, they are not going to be able to disappear as somebody perhaps who is booking it once for a party and then wrecks the place, and is a much more difficult to trace. If somebody damaged, if a regular group damaged it and then refused to pay, they would find it remarkably difficult to be able to hire anywhere else, because clearly it would be then known by across Skegness that they're not to be trusted.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Claxton?
No, I'm still not happy that they're not being charged anything, because regardless if they're well known or the town council is not going to go out and tarnish their name because they didn't pay a deposit. I'd like to see, even if it's just the minimal general deposit, I would like a deposit put in their place for anybody that uses the hall, myself, and I'll propose that before this gets moved at the end.
Can I come back on that? The only problem is that the payment of a deposit, us depositing that deposit and then paying them back, actually has an administrative overhead. If we're doing that for somebody who's paying £6 for we will have spent more in taking and replacing and giving back the deposit than we would have got for hiring the hall. So, we need to be careful and sensible about how we run this in a way which still makes some money for us. Also, the regular bookings, they're paying for their sessions in advance. So if somebody books it for a term, they're giving us the hire charge for the term. So we've already got their money in that sense, and they're just then eating into that as they use it. So if they wrecked it in the early on in that period, then we would have the money that they've paid us for the hire charge.
But then what happens if they wreck it on their last session?
Well, it's a risk, and to be honest, the deposit's not going to cover any major damage anyway, other than the deposit that we've put for a party or function.
With all due respect, it's not my money that is, and it's not my town hall, so I'd still like a deposit in there. But
Councillor Claxton, I've got other people to come in, and then if you want to put your proposal forward, and if you've got a second, and then we can go to the vote. But
okay,
bring the others in first. Councillor Dankirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was kind of in relation to, because obviously now we've got a little bit of history. I've got one observation to make and also one question for the clerk to respond to, if possible. And the clerk kind of alluded to it. Now, if somebody was to book the small partition just for an hour on a Friday evening, then the council is not going to recoup the costs from that single hour booking, potentially, once you've factored in having somebody come back to lock up and do the close of day procedure. So that was my observation. I think that there's the risk that it might not be viable, but then there's a question: is does this happen? More importantly, have we had any experience of people just booking it for an hour or so? Because what I would like to see is some sort of minimum charge for kind of the hour session. So I could appreciate that taking £4, all it would take is for the clerk or a member of the team to be on the phone arranging that booking for 15-20 minutes. For that administrative cost in their half an hour's worth of labour to be more than what they would recruit in fees. So a question to Clark: do people just book it for a short amount of time? And if that was the case, does it happen frequently? And does the council recoup its costs associated with that?
Town Clerk, please.
Right. Mustn't lose the sight that this is a community hall, and therefore lots of the people who would like to use it are community-based organisations that don't have a lot of money, and therefore, paying a commercial rate would be prohibitive for them, and they wouldn't be able to do it. We've not experienced that short-term booking in the evenings and weekends where it will require an extra, an extra on-site visit to check up and lock up afterwards. We have had hours, 2 hours, 3 hour sessions during the daytime, but obviously we've got staff on site at that time. Now, the smaller charges are really only probably covering costs, but if we get enough of those, then they pay for a bit towards the heating, a bit towards the lighting, etc., which goes on, whether or not we're hiring it out. So, yeah, there's no sign that we're regularly getting out of hours, short-term, small bookings at this moment in time. The out-of-hour type booking, so weekends, tend to be for longer sessions, so they're all-day sessions. So that, which makes a bit of financial sense for us, because we've got staff there, cafe staff there for most of that period anyway, and it might require one of the ground staff to come back, who operate caretaking service, to come back and lock up, and everything's okay at the end.
Thank you. That does answer my question. Will this also factor in the additional COVID mitigation and the additional cleaning that might be required? Is that something we might need to take a temporary act on?
It doesn't at this moment. No, it doesn't. We haven't included anything extra on there, because I think my feeling is that if we increase the charges, there's especially the smaller groups would be the ones that would be penalised and less able to use it, and it would be those that are in a more commercial position who would be able to pay that. So and that's sort of reflected in the fact that we've got higher charges for those anyway. So no, it hasn't got extra mitigation, but I mean, we've been running mitigation since it opened now, because it opened, we went straight into lockdown after we occupied the building, so we haven't run it in any different way. And hopefully, if we move beyond the 21st of June, perhaps the mitigations might well reduce somewhat. Many of those that come along bring their own mitigation measures anyway, because they have their own risk assessments. So, for example, if I think back to the last summer when we had groups doing things like Tai Chi, we had a slimming group in there. They brought their own hand sanitizers and etc., so that they were able to operate safely themselves.
Thank you. Town Clerk, can I just ask a question? Would it not be beneficial for us to, when we do these hourly rates, would it not be beneficial to have a period within office hours, so it wouldn't accrue any additional costs? And then wouldn't that enable the cafe to probably ride on the back of this as well? Once everybody locks up and gone, I'm just wondering if it's something that you could do for the hourly sessions. When the members of staff are leaving the building, then we've got no extra costs. It's just a thought.
As I say, most of the sessions that occur are occurring during working hours anyway. The only one is a long-term booking currently for an all-day Saturday group that goes from first thing in the morning till the evening time, and that does require somebody to come back. It occasionally requires, depending on the time of arrival, we might need to send someone in who's already working there. Let's not forget, in the gardens or that in Tower Gardens. We might need to send them across to open the building up and to let them in and to make sure that they're settled in. And equally, in the evening, they tend to be doing their late night bin run or litter picking, so they're there at that time as well. So for the 8 till 6, I don't see a particular problem. When it goes into evening times, then obviously we're charging more to cover that additional charge of having to bring somebody in specially to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what the clerk was saying about the small charge, the modest charge for local groups and community groups. That's not a commercial rate. It's nowhere near a commercial rate, but it is a community hub. That's what we set it up for. And I can't see, personally, I have no issue with it being a low rate. And if on occasion we are slightly out of pocket as a town council, but have done some real good in the community, then I would think there's no difference between doing that and making a small grant donation. But on this occasion, we can make a small grant donation to lots and lots of different groups. So for me, it sits perfectly comfortable with the original ethos of what this is all about. And I apologise to the town clerk because he knows full well that I was the one who originally cobbled these figures together very, very quickly. And I do apologise that they didn't balance. What I would say in hindsight, I would be tempted to put an uplift on all commercial activity to make commercial activity the same price as private parties, weddings and private functions. So my recommendation would be, yes, that we do leave the community charge at the very low level, on the appreciation that on occasions we may actually be slightly subsidising it, but we do this for the benefit of the people of Skegness. But for any commercial activity, so whatever that may be, will writing, whatever commercial activity is, that they would pay a higher rate, so they would pay the same charge as private parties, weddings and private functions. This is a community hub. We should have it available for the community first and everybody else after that. So that is actually a proposal I'm making, that commercial activity charge does raise. We don't want to be in competition with the other organisations, the other private businesses in town which already receive funding for commercial activity, in my opinion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second Councillor Kirk's proposal. Absolutely right. That's what we agreed on in the very beginning. This was a community hub, and if you're going to force community groups out of being able to use our hall, then I think it would be a crying shame. So I would like to second Councillor Kirk. Also on the deposit, regular users, I wouldn't in my own business be getting a deposit off them because they're regular, I trust them. And if anything does get broke, they always offer to pay because they want to keep coming back. So I can understand what Councillor Claxton's saying, but I wouldn't be depositing a regular user. That's just my personal view. But the main thing is to second Councillor Steve Kirk's proposal.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a couple of proposals. So we've got Councillor Claxton's proposal that we stick a deposit charge in there. He'll be looking for a seconder if we've got one. And then we've got the proposal by Councillor Steve Kirk, obviously the outset, the community hall, and look after the community, and also make some money when we do hire it out, and which has been seconded by Councillor Danny Brooks. So do we have a seconder for Councillor Claxton to put a deposit on? No, I'm sorry, Councillor Claxton, we haven't got no seconder. So we've got a proposal on the table by Councillor Steve Kirk and seconded by Councillor Danny Brooks. All in favour, please show.
It's a majority.
Thank you, Town Clerk. As I said, if you joined us on this Zoom meeting, this update is absolutely going crazy on the screen. Again, moving on to agenda item number 16, response to the pupil admission numbers at Skegness Grammar School and consultation on the future boarding provisions at Skegness Grammar School, which are attached. Skegness Grammar School, part of the David Rose Educational Trust, is undertaking a consultation regarding amendments to the boarding provisions at Skegness Grammar School. The specific change that trustees are making, closure of boarding provisions located at Wainfleet Hall. Skegness Grammar School are holding the consultation between the 8th of March 2021 and the 19th of April 2021. Details how to respond to the consultation can be found at the www.lincolnshire.gov.uk directory record with the number. It's all there, which will be on the site for anybody to look back at. Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought this was a really good letter to the council. You know, they're taking on board our observations and findings. I think it's nice that there's this community engagement tone to the letter as well, with regards to them not reducing the pupil number. I'm a little bit... in one of the paragraphs, it was basically... the point was that they want to have classes of 30 because that's more financially viable and financially economical. That was the connotation that I took from that. And to be perfectly honest, that's not really material concern. They're delivering educational service, not necessarily running a business. That's not what it's about. But the whole tone and nature of the letter, I think, is really welcoming and really promising, 100%. With regards to the boarding school, I actually don't think this is a problem, the boarding house at Wainfleet. It's been poorly utilised for quite some years. And I could appreciate that it's a significant financial drain, because I also understand that it's in quite a state of disrepair as well. The fact that they're only getting a handful of boarders attending. And let's not forget that this isn't people that live in Skegness. Historically, it's always been people outside of Skegness that are paying privately for their children to attend a well sought after grammar school in the country, and also lots of international students. What I do find slightly concerning, however, that there isn't this demand from national and international students. What does that tell us about the quality of teaching and learning? I don't know. So in my personal opinion, I don't see the boarding house being an asset to children of Skegness, in my opinion. So I wouldn't have any sort of problems about that service being reduced personally. But I also like to thank Stuart Barnes for noting, and also David Ross for acknowledging that the grammar school is remaining at 232. But I do have concerns if they're struggling to fill those places. Why is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah, it's a fine letter. It sets out what we ask them to consider, and they've considered that. So I have no issues with the comment. I'd agree entirely about the boarding house over in Wainfleet. It's a big old building. When I can remember in my days as an electrician, I was there just as it was closed as a care home. And it was a big old building, and it wasn't in the greatest of states. And then shortly after that, the grammar school took it over. The fact that they have nobody wishing to stay there, I think maybe suggests where the grammar school is currently. It isn't where it used to be. It was said to be top 8 in the country, and now it's one of the best in Lincolnshire. So, that's not a criticism of them. That's just the way that things move around. So if they haven't got the demand for it, why on earth would they keep it? If it's only housing a couple of people from China or whatever country they're from, it has no impact on Wainfleet. It has no impact on Skegness. So, it's a business decision, and they obviously are a business, so we should let them get on and make it. But I take the point that maybe they shouldn't be a business, but if this is a financial drain they can get away with and put more money into schools and education, and that's got to be good news for everybody.
Okay, thank you. So are you proposing that we note this, Councillor Dankirk?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we note it, and also to propose that individual members of this council complete the survey on behalf of as a councillor, as opposed to a council itself, unless members of the of this council would echo both myself and Steve's comments that we kind of understand why that they're going down this route, and maybe even if we were to submit a response of that nature on behalf of the council in support of that decision, I don't see any harm in that. So yeah, I think we should, we'll agree to note it. And I think I'll also propose that we respond as a council, because they're showing, significant commitment in the wording and the language in this letter that they want to work closely with us. So we should, follow the lead as well. I just wonder what other members think.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Kirk.
I would be more than happy to second that as a proposal that we write as a council, if that's council's wish, obviously saying that we have no great objections to them closing the boarding school, and hope it allows them to put more of their resources into the education of our young children. A letter to those lines. They've written to us saying they'd like to work in partnership, and I think a letter of coming back from the entire council, I think would go a long way to foment that partnership further.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with what's been said, and I support that. And also, I've just had a text from Councillor Cunnington saying he's in the waiting room trying to get into the meeting. Thank you.
Town Clerk says he's not. Sorry. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think as Councillor Dan and Steve Kirk have said, I was very surprised with the letter and very pleased with the letter. They took the time to actually engage with us rather than just chuck our letter in the bin and ignore us. So I think definitely should write back as they have proposed and seconded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded. They're there in front of you. The Town Council responds. The Town Clerk will deal with that. So all in favour, please show.
Majority.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 17, street naming request, which is attached. To consider the street names Maxwell Road, Walter Lane and Viking Drive for approval, or otherwise as of the subject on the Saxon Field Phase 5. Any questions? You have the letters in front of you, the letter in front of you there with the names and the reasons why they've come forward with these names. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think they're surprisingly awful, to be perfectly honest. I could live with Maxwell Road or Walther Lane on the estate in Saxon Fields. It's not a lane. What are they on with? Viking Drive, well, that's really, they might as well just called it Skeggy Drive, hadn't they? So I would suggest, I've got no great issues with them, but I just think they're really weak, they're really poor, and a lack of any effort. If we can have named streets in our town built and named for the rest of our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren, can we put a decent name to it rather than Walther Lane? My opinion, I expect to be shot down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks.
I find myself agreeing with Councillor Steve Kirk again. When I'm driving anywhere and I'm looking for a lane, I'm looking for a lane, not a road in the middle of a housing estate. Again, like Steve said, that's just my opinion, but I totally agree with him. Maxwell Road, like you said, you could live with that, but Walther Lane in the middle of an housing estate, I just think that's a Mickey take.
Okay, thank you. Any other opinions? Councillor Dankirk.
Yeah, scrap Waltzer Lane for sure. Just be going round and round in circles trying to find that house. it's got no class or any sort of no. I mean, so it should be something that reflects the heritage of our town, and basing it entirely on one business in the organisation in the town, I don't think is tasteful entirely, in my opinion. Maybe even if it's something, you know, in line with previous honorary citizens or something of that nature, that would be far more in keeping than, oh, let's just pick something. Oh, what's Skegness known for? Oh, we'll call it Clock Tower Lane, or you know, it's not really. There's no thought in there. So I would happily support Maxwell Road. You know, a name, fine. I would reject and propose that we reject Waltzer Lane. Viking Drive, it's very vanilla. I mean, there's nothing wrong with vanilla in certain establishments, but not for something that's going to be in our town for the rest of centuries to come, hopefully. I think they could go back with the latter two for sure, and I'd like to propose that, please.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the town clerk, really. Are they asking us or telling us?
The policy around street naming is that the actual approval of the street naming partly sits with the town council. That is, the council can effectively veto a name. However, a name that is put forward can also be vetoed by East Lindsey District Council Building Control, and it also can be vetoed by the post office. So we're part of a group of those that look at the street naming. Now, we're one of the few areas in the East Lindsey District that actually have any say over street naming. And this dates back a number of years to when the function was as partly delegated to the town council. But the procedure still rests with East Lindsey Building Control, who have the, if you like, the final say on it. What I would say is that with some estates in the past, the council have formulated an agreement with the builder. So, for example, there was one that was based on Lincolnshire airports or airstrips. And so a lot of the RAF names were used for those. For newer developments, there hasn't really been that guidance, and therefore council hasn't really given the builders any real guidance in what sort of area you would like those names to fall. And that might be something that you want to consider for future developments in Skegness, so that there's a bit more of a formula to it. What I would say is that most of these are now properties that are built out and waiting to get their postcodes and addresses. And obviously, the next opportunity will be the beginning of May for council to consider them. So just have in mind the fact that that would put a delay into potentially the sale of the houses, because obviously if they haven't got a street address and a postcode, then it makes it difficult for anybody to buy them.
Can I come back on that, town clerk?
Please do, Councillor. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Well, that leaves us between a rock and a hard place, really. Can we not write a very polite letter just asking to give it a rethink? And if it has to be that, it has to be that. But we're not that happy, and so far we don't seem to be that happy with Waltzer Lane. or even Oil Drum Lane next. But is it not possible for us to just say a letter that we, you know, just send them a very polite letter and just say we're not just not into it at all, really. So
yeah,
sure.
I mean, it might be useful if council were to give some suggestions that, you know, of what would be approved, so that at least they've got something to move forward with. So obviously, what we don't want to do is get into a situation where they keep bringing forward proposals and those get rejected by council. So if there were some, you know, areas that you would think, oh yes, that those would be good names, then it would be useful to go back with that, and at least then they know that they are on a positive footing.
Thank you. Can I just comment as well? I don't think any of us are happy with these names, and I think that when they put like the Walsall Lane in, I think they've just tried to humour us. I think there's a lot of history in Skegness. If you look at various places, whether it be the clock tower, war memorials, there's a lot of history, and I think a little bit more thought could have gone into it. I really think we do need to write and ask them, but like the town clerk says, we've got to give them some ideas, but maybe it's something we can do. Got some hands up. Let me just bring the list up. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's Alexis here.
Thank you. Dan Kirk, Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we need to give the clerk.
Sorry, can Councillor Saxon turn his microphone off, please?
Off.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Still hear you. It gets feedback. Thank you. Councillor Dankirk, sorry.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the clerk's advice, so we need to give them a scope in which we would accept. So, for example, something like species of protected animals at Gibraltar Point, I don't know, Lapwing Lane or whatever. Something, I think we need to give the clerk something that we can agree with right now, but I think this needs perhaps a task and finish group to help get a naming convention that perhaps can be used in future applicants, so it's not kind of sprung at us in you know, quite quickly like this. And it also gives the clerk the ability to give an immediate response to whoever the developers in the future are going to be, to say, look, these are the things that could be accepted. Go away, try and choose something like this. So we could choose something to do with Gibraltar Point, or we could do something in relation to previous honoured citizens. We do need to give the clerk and the developer some stuff that we could all agree to. I don't know if anybody wants to propose anything of that nature, but I'd support it.
Do you think we should, as councillors on the meeting, give the clerk an email with some names of what we would think? And do you think that would help him, where we could all pick one or three that we like, or go with the majority? Councillor Saxon, you got your hand up. You'll have to turn your video off. You'll have to turn your video off because we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Councillor Saxon. Your video needs to be turned off for us to hear you. Can you turn your video off? No. Councillor Claxton. Councillor Claxton.
It was just an idea for a name. It's okay.
Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Naming is difficult because we all have our own ones. For example, I quite like the idea of something, let's say, Sydney Lane or perhaps Dennis Drive. You know, I think both of those have a lovely ring to them. Or alternatively, I have got an old street map that was laid out many years ago. The original street map was laid out for Skegness, and there were some roads there that never ever got used. So historically they were going to be used. My street map is dated 1878, and they were the daughters of, I believe them to be the daughters of the original Earl of Scarborough. So he was going to call He had down Sybil Road and Lillian Road as two of the roads he was going to use around Pullet Service, or as we like to call it now, St Matthew's roundabout. So we could use some of those roads that were used in history. But I say the problem is it's all a matter of conjecture, isn't it? Because I have no issue. I would quite like to use those roads because they were roads he was going to use, but he never got around to using them. But the developer may hate them with a vengeance. Difficult one. But I agree with the town clerk. We did used to have a group that met and we would name an entire estate. Hence the reason when the estate was built off Church Lane, all those roads have ecclesiastical themes. So that's why you got Canterbury Way and things like that. And then we have the Battle of Britain airfields and you know, all sorts of different things can be done. Native species of Lincolnshire is another one that could be done. I know we've already got Buckthorn, but there's other ones as well. So we need to give it some thought. And it's really, really difficult for a committee just to pick names out of the air, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edgington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with colleagues that these proposals aren't very inspiring. And the thoughts occurred to me, I don't know what colleagues feel about this, that in the last few months, a Skegness man who became internationally known through his sporting prowess passed away, Ray Clements. So couldn't we perhaps incorporate his surname into something, because he was a Skegness lad that made good and was well respected within his chosen profession and represented his country on numerous occasions. And sad to say, he passed away in the last few months. It's just a thought that perhaps colleagues might want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Ty.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, looking at the three roads they want to name, Maxwell Road, I could certainly live with, and Viking Drive, I could live with that. It's the Walter Lane that I think we've really got to look at, and I quite agree with Councillor Dick Edgington there, that what is wrong with going with that favoured son. Thank you.
Thank you. There's nothing wrong with that. I would support that as well, but we'll just be mindful of the spelling, because we've got St Clement's Green and the St Clement's Road. It's how it's spelled. It's a very difficult one, but I fully agree with you on that one, Councillor Edgington. Councillor Jimmy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I propose basically that we keep Maxwell Road, keep Viking Drive, and as Councillor Edgington says, we change the middle name to something along the lines of St Clement's or Clement's Road or something along them lines to suit that. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis.
I actually think that's a great idea, and I think it should be called Ray Clements, whatever, Drive, Lane, Avenue. I think that'll be, so accept the two. I put a motion now to accept the two and put Ray Clementson as a third and remove Walter Lane out of it. And if somebody will second me, we'll put that to the vote and get on.
Yes, thank you. What a good one! What a good one be Ray Clement's way, as in the way he did things and the way he was, and you know, just a thought in there. I've got a lot of hands up. Just got to fin my list. Tony Ty.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I totally concur with Councillor Dennis. I think that's a terrific idea, and let's send that into them within the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edgington, would you like to come back?
Yes, thank you. I thank colleagues for supporting my suggestion, and I will go along with Councillor Dennis's proposal wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you've got that town clerk that will accept Maxwell Road, Viking Drive, and then the Clements.
Ray Clements Way.
Ray Clements Way. I think that's the best thing to describe. And it ties in there with the Lumley school that he went to when there was a Viking house as well. So it all ties in nicely. So you've got that town clerk. All in favour then please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 18. Changes to the internal audit which are attached. Town clerk, please.
Yes, there have been changes to the regulations that support the legislation. So this is not legislation itself; it's all of the supporting guidelines that go with it that are undertaken by a combination of a joint practitioner group, which comprises representatives from different bodies. What they have come up with is essentially a change in the emphasis of the way that the internal audit is done. Previously, internal audits have been very much focused on transactional audits. So that is people coming in and checking that invoices tie in with the payments that are made, that tie in with the bank statement. So it's very much looking at the facts and figures and following those through. The suggestion, well, the guidelines are changing so that the audits in the future will be very much more systems-based audits. And by system, I don't mean necessarily IT system. I mean the process by which things are done. So, for example, instead of looking at whether invoices or payments are made in, and they tie up together, they will look at the way in which the council actually manages those payments and look at the actual process that sits behind it and whether that process actually gives you internal control. So, for example, it would be looking at things like separation of duty to make sure that one person can't agree, can't place the order, make the payment, agree what's gone on in the bank statement, etc., so that the system is visible and transparent to anybody who wants to look at it. But there are lots of areas that they would want to, that could be looked at. Now, the emphasis is going to be changed as well, away from a situation where essentially I would come along and say, oh, this is we need to employ an internal auditor. This is what they're going to do. And council just saying, yes, we agree with that. Very much more putting the emphasis back on yourselves to actually take a bit more control of that process. And that would include the council writing and agreeing a letter of appointment and setting out the areas that you would want the internal auditor to focus on in that particular year. So you wouldn't ever audit everything every year because, one, it would be very expensive to do that, and secondly, you would end up with a lot of information and it would take up a lot of office time responding to all of the questions that might occur. But you might want to, year by year, decide, well, this is an area that we haven't looked at for a while and we need to examine in a bit more detail, and therefore you might put that forward as a way of, as part of that appointment of the internal auditor. Now, the way that we operate the audit at the moment is that there are 4 councils whose clerks audit one another. Now, we don't audit the council that's auditing us, but we audit one of the 4. And the clerks do that on the basis that they get effectively the time to do that audit, and then there's no payment or charge made by any of the councils to any of the others. So effectively, it's a free service. Now, it doesn't look as if that particular route is going to be viable going forward, because one of the guidelines that's been set out is that council must be reassured that the person undertaking the audit is as in accordance with the legislation, is capable and not professionally qualified in the sense of exams, but has the knowledge and skills to be able to undertake that. And one of the ways in which it's been suggested that that be appraised is by them having professional indemnity insurance. Now, quite clearly, us as clerks are not going to be taking out professional indemnity insurance so that we can undertake a free of charge service to other councils. So I think the route that we've used for a number of years is not going to be open moving forward. That means that the council's likely to have to appoint an independent auditor and pay for their services. Now, also within the guidance is that rather than having the one-off audit that tends to happen at the moment, so tends to be at the end of the year, once the final accounts have been done, we go and audit the other. I would go and audit another council, check that their finances match up, all their paperwork matches up, that they've done the things that they're supposed to do. But it's not a full-blown systems audit, as I've mentioned. And if you're going to do a systems audit, it's likely to be required over a period of time. So I would suggest that at least 2 visits are going to be required. And on that basis, if you've got somebody who's going to be appointed, they're going to have to do some preliminary work. They're going to have to come in probably on 2 occasions to undertake the audit. They're then going to have to write up the report and sign all the paperwork off. And realistically, we're going to be looking at a minimum of £1,000. It could easily be £1,500, depending on what you decide to put into that audit. Now, tonight, we're not actually here to agree anything because we've still got to go through the current year audit. But I think as we move forward into we're now in 2021-22, but as we start looking at the accounts for that, we're going to have to set out and look at what it is that council needs to do in a bit more detail and how you're going to go about the process of appointing an auditor and actually instructing them what to do. There's also then the problem that we haven't got a budget for this because it wasn't a budgeted item in the past, and therefore council will have to find the money for that audit to take place. So it's really at this point appraising you if this is what's going to happen, and over the coming months we'll have to go into a bit more detail and make the decisions. You'll have to make the decisions how you want to move forward.
Thank you. Adrian, Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, excuse my naivety on this one, Town Clerk. We do pay for an external audit, and now you're talking about an internal audit that we've done ourselves, and we now need, I'm struggling to find out what it actually means. Does it mean that basically we carry on doing what we're doing and we're employing somebody at a cost of £1,000, £1,500, whatever, to come in and just check, make sure we've done it correctly? So really, I just wanted to know if that's basically, are we getting somebody to come and check what we're doing is correct? And could you explain what the difference is between an external and internal audit, please? Thank you.
Town Clerk, please.
The internal audit is much more detailed, and the external auditor actually relies to quite a large extent on the view of the internal auditor. So if you recall back to last year when the final accounts were made, there were a series of statements that have to make. And one of those is that you've got adequate internal controls in place to ensure that the council finances are properly managed. Now, the sorts of internal controls that you've got are things that, like we've had this evening, where you get a list of payments, you also get the bank statement, so you're able to carry out a check. So that's part of the validation that the money being spent is actually valid, that you've seen it, it's been approved, and that you're happy with the process that's behind that. And indeed, we publish all of our transactions online. Some councils don't publish all of them; they just publish them above a certain limit. But we publish all of those. But there are other things that happen. So you might want to look at how we procure things. You might want to look at the hall hire process. You might want to look at the cemetery processes, the finances that sit behind that. How we charge allotments, and do we get the money in that there's a whole host of different things that involve finances, but internal audit also looks at risk. So we have quite a sophisticated risk management system in place. So you're looking at that on at least a quarterly basis in the management committee. And if you think, if some of those risks came into being, there would likely be a cost to the council of that risk happening. So part of your managing that risk is to reduce the likelihood of you incurring that cost as a council. So again, an auditor, a systems auditor, would look at how that works and whether it's robust enough. Now, I'm your responsible finance officer, so I'm advising you, but of course, it's you effectively getting professional support to ensure that what I'm saying is correct and that the way that we work is correct. So that's the work of the internal auditor. So it's you as the board employing your person to come in and to tell you that everything is okay. External audit is effectively the government setting out, some very, very basic rules and regulations around the operation of a council. As long as you can tick those boxes and there's nothing significant, no significant changes in the figures that are not explained, then they'll be satisfied.
Thank you. Answer your question, Councillor Finlay.
I'm just going to nod my head and think about it.
Okay. I'll bring Councillor Dennis. You had your hand up. You put it down. Did you want to speak? Your microphone's off. Sorry.
Sorry, I will, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. I know. I know. In accounting, you don't get a lot for 1,500 quid. It'll be more like 5k, I would think. So, council needs to be very aware about this, because professional charges are very, very expensive. But I do see the town clerk's point. If that's where the legislation line is, we have to get professional people in, and professional people have professional charges. And it is very, very, very expensive. Without any shadow of a doubt, there's no way of cutting corners, because you've got to have people, with absolutely the proper qualifications. But I should be interested to know what other councillors have to say about it. But it's going to cost a significant amount of money.
Yeah, it is expensive. Councillor Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Steve Kirk. Sorry.
Yeah, I take on board what the clerk's saying. In my opinion, what we've been terming an internal audit is more of an internal verification. It's going through the transactions and making sure the transactions are what they say they are and they're in the right place. I can actually see mileage in continuing in doing that service, because I think it is a really important thing to have. We get a statement every year that says, yeah, everything that the clerk has been doing, the deputy clerk has been doing for us is right. The payments have been made as they show they've been made. It has come out of the right account and the accounts are where they should be. I think that is a useful piece of information for us as councillors to have. I also think paying somebody to deep dive a particular activity the council does also has huge value. It allows a professional to come in and really scrutinise how we're doing things, how we're paying for things, and how we manage the risks associated with those activities. So I personally would hate to lose the current system. I know it's a burden on the 4 clerks involved, but I'd hate to use that because I think as a councillor, it gives me a level of reinsurance. The only other way I could get that is to sit there myself with the town clerk and go through the entire year's statements and transactions. So I think that's a really important piece of work that the clerks are doing for each of the parish. And I think as councillors, it sits us in quite a comfortable position, knowing that that piece of work has been done by somebody outside of our organisation. So I've no issues. If we're able to keep that, I would really like us to keep that. Appreciate what the clerk's saying about the new guidance coming out and we're going to have to pay. And Councillor Dennis is quite right. If the town clerk can get a good piece of work from someone who's suitably qualified for £1,500, including expenses, then he's earned his salary just there. Because I would suggest that they do know how to charge, and they would probably say, well, before I can actually give you a quote for this, I need to have a scope. My scoping is charged at £900 plus VAT a day, and then I can give you a quote for how much the work's going to take. So I can see it soon escalating beyond that figure, but that's a figure that's been put in. I think we need to be mindful that we could be moving upwards of that, and it's down to us to make sure when we're setting the piece of work for the internal auditor that we don't ask for too much, so we're too far north. So I would like to recommend, and the clerk can tell me if this recommendation is wrong and not doable, but I'd like to recommend we keep our current system as more of an internal verification, which is what I believe it is, rather than an internal audit, and that we do, as the clerk suggests, think about what area of the town council business we would like to deep dive and get a full internal audit done of that.
Thank you, town clerk.
Only one person can sign off the internal audit for the external auditor. And of course, the decision doesn't rest just with this council, it rests with other councils who have been involved. I mean, it's Louth, Mablethorpe, and Orford who have been ourselves that have been the 4 councils that have worked together. There's nothing to stop. And you'd expect a certain amount of that checking to continue as part of the internal audit, but with the systems audit being added on top of that. And I think all councils are going to hit a big problem because there's not actually that many professionals out there that can do it. I mean, I know of one Lincolnshire council who employed a firm of professional auditors who simply didn't understand how local government worked and therefore ended up validating something that was actually quite wrong. So it's about employing somebody who has sector knowledge, but even within the sector, if we, for instance, had an internal auditor from one of the principal councils, they operate under a different set of regulations to the regulations that we operate under. So although there are some broad similarities, there are also some quite significant technical differences. So again, you could end up with someone validating something that is not right, or seeking to stop something that actually is perfectly okay. So it needs to be somebody who has got sector experience. We're hoping that Lauk is going to be able to procure or find a way of procuring this on behalf of all of the Lincolnshire authorities. And if that's the case, then at least then you would be a bit more assured that it is the right type of person for the sector that we operate in. But picking up on Councillor Kirk's point, I wouldn't see that basic level of checking being completely removed. I think that does form a fundamental part of the validation of the accounts. And I think the external auditor would still want to see most of that being done. But this is an additional level of validation on the processes that we as a council have got, and you as councillors, have got in place systems that you can rely on to be robust and actually work in a way that means that things like misappropriation, fraud, just error won't happen, and because the system doesn't allow it to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the two previous speakers, Councillor Dennis and Councillor Kirk, said, this does worry me. I think a specialist in this sector will probably be a lot more money than that, and I think it is a big worry for the council. It should be. And I was going to suggest, or I was going to ask Steve, if there's any chance that the councils that we do work with are all going to club together and try and find one auditor, and we can do a deal so that we're all using the same one and get a better price. Councillor Kirk's his idea I thought was very good. Keep the same system and then just have somebody delve into certain areas. But if the legislation's changing, I think this could be a big finance cost for us unless we can find a special deal. As Councillor Dennis says, if you find somebody that can do it for that price, give me the number. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Yeah, just coming back on the previous speakers and the figures, obviously, like Councillor Dennis says, you can start straying up into many thousands, and like Councillor Brooks has just said, if we can work in with somebody else. But on the moving the forward, it does say assuming, and then looking around about the 1,500. Do we know if that is within the area based on what Councillor Dennis has said, looking at 4,000 or 5,000 quid, or are we looking at something more and this is just a predictive figure? Thank you.
Please.
That very much depends on the brief that you give the auditor. So if you give the brief an extensive brief that requires days and days and days of work, then clearly the figures are going to rise quite steeply. The 1,500 figure is based around effectively 3 days work at £500 a day, which the sector that we work in, which will be slightly cheaper than the private sector, I think is what you could look at. So effectively, they would be there for the initial prep, writing the report, and then 2 days on site carrying out an audit, albeit it would be a limited audit, which you would perhaps, as I say, just choose one area to do that deep delving into, rather than trying to do everything every year, because then the cost would certainly mount then.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis. Microphone, Councillor Dennis.
I need to leave the meeting now. Good night all. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Any further comments? Councillor Brooks, Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I'll just move that we note the report. I think it's only for noting tonight and then decisions later on. As Councillor Kirk said, Steve will earn his salary, getting us the right people.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and noted the report is for noting, and I'm not quite happy to second that we do know this. but I would ask the town clerk, would you mind asking his colleagues across Mablethorpe, Louth and Alford, was it Mablethorpe, Louth, Horncastle? Whichever, I do apologise for whichever town I've got wrong, and ask them if they would continue to do what they currently do for us, if we did it for those, because as a councillor, I would like to know that was being done. And if that would allow us then just to pay somebody to do a specific piece of work rather than lots of checking, it might, to me, I think that would add value to it.
I can certainly raise that.
Thank you. That was all I'm asking. Yeah, no commitment, just a question.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded that we note this. All in favour, please show.
Yeah, note, and Steve asked the questions.
Yes, okay, thank you. That's carried, town clerk, yeah.
It is.
Okay, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. We'll see you at the next council meeting, which is Wednesday, the 5th of May. Just be careful as we go into the next, we come out of lockdown. So I say stay safe. Thank you and good.